Hello, BookTube. I need your help. Over the last few days, the co-hosts of Rocket Summer have uploaded announcement videos announcing the return of Rocket Summer this July. Rocket Summer is the creation of Michael K. Vaughan. During Rocket Summer, participants read vintage science fiction in the month of July. By vintage science fiction, it's meant science fiction from the genre's origins, whether you count that as being in the early 20th century with the pulp magazines, the later 19th century with Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, the earlier 19th century with Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, or all the way back to the True History, or A True History by Lucian, an ancient Roman writer. The end point is equally as nebulous, roughly 1969, but the idea is to differentiate the science fiction that came before and in opposition to the New Wave. The New Wave is a movement in science fiction that focuses more on, or whose writers have greater literary ambitions and focus more on character than earlier and competing science fiction movements do. I participated in Rocket Summer last year, but the 4 books I selected did not work out. I bailed on all 4 of them. So I don't know, I'm cautious, unsure if I will or should participate in this year's Rocket Summer or sit out. And that's why I'm making this video, to try to kind of work through what I want to do and to ask for advice. So one of the big issues I'm having is that while science fiction and fantasy is, mostly fantasy, is my favorite genre by a large margin across all media, since the end of 2019, my love for the prose form of science fiction and fantasy has withered. I'm to the point where right now where I have very little interest in the prose form of science fiction and fantasy, and that's affecting things. I've gone ahead and selected a few books that would meet the criteria for Rocket Summer, but I'm not enthusiastic for it. And so, again, I would like your opinion. So this is what I have so far. I could select relevant short stories from The Ascent of Wonder, The Evolution of Hard SF, edited by David G. Hartwell and Kathryn Cramer. So what I would do is select 4 to 8 short stories from this anthology, published between the 1920s to 1969, and try to read them. I could also reread Lost Worlds by Clark Ashton Smith. He has been one of my favorite weird authors, which is a combination of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And most of his work, or all of his work, would fit the parameters. And it has been a very long time since I read this book. I think 6 or 7 years. So I think how long I've had it. I could try to redeem The Jewel in the Skull by Michael Moorcock, part of the Hawkmoon series. Although I really didn't like it the first time I tried it, so not entirely sure why I would want to try it again. Of course, also Not sure why I really bought that book. Sometimes I do these things where I bill on something and then I'll want it back and then it still doesn't work. So anyway, or I could try for the first time Out of the Dead City by Samuel R. Delany, which is part of an omnibus called The Fall of the Towers. Now, I would probably only, if I do decide to participate in Rocket Summer, I would probably only do one of those 4 options, because there are other things I want to prioritize in July. Now, while I'm talking about science fiction, there is another project I have that also deals in science fiction that I'm uncertain what to do with. And that is my back to school reading project. So a little bit of background. So back in 2020, during the pandemic, the spring semester of school was canceled or was shifted to online at home learning. And Doors of Aldi Books created a event called Back to School or Summer School, where the prompts related to various subjects in school. And I really liked the idea of that event. It was a one-off, unfortunately, but I've kept it alive for myself periodically. And I'm thinking of doing it again this year. And if I focus on a very fiction-heavy version of this, then there are 3 opportunities at least for science or science fiction, math, science, and computer science. So I'm thinking about these 4 books for this. And again, I'm really not terribly enthusiastic. It's just I'm pulling for stuff. And so I could try for the first time Sundiver by David Brin. I could reread The Dispossessed by Ursula K. LeGuin. I read this well over 20 years ago and didn't like it. I could try Neuromancer by William Gibson again. Well, I read it. I read it almost 20 years ago. And it was okay, but I don't know if I would really want to reread it. But this is basically the only thing I have that would fit for computer science, which really works well with cyberpunk. Or I could redeem Dhalgren by Samuel R. Delany, which I tried to read about 20 years ago and failed. So I don't quite know what I should do. If I should participate in Rocket Summer, and if whatever plan doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, move on to something else. And the same thing would be true for my back to school project if I decide to go for a more fiction heavy version of it. Or as far as that's concerned, maybe try to retool it into maybe a more nonfiction version, which I've been thinking about doing for a while, and just not shifting that to nonfiction November, or some kind of mix where, say, English and the second language would be fiction or poetry, and then history, math, and science would be nonfiction, and then the electives could be either or. I don't know exactly what I want to do. So again, if you have any advice, comments, please shout out in the comment section down below. Anyway, BookTube, I will probably report back what I have decided to do when I make my July reading plan, which should come up July 1st, if everything goes according to plan. Although when exactly on July 1st, I don't know, because it might also include a book haul of 1 volume of poetry. So, anyway, BookTube, I will be right back with a book haul, because I do have a book haul. So, anyway, BookTube, until then, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.